announcements that we have. I also want to recognize any board members that are out in the audience. If you can go ahead and raise your hand. And thank you for being here tonight. I also want to recognize any of the task force members that are on the task force. I would like for you to also raise your hand and thank you for the work that you've done so far. And the team that's here to assist me. So always thanking them all the time because we couldn't do this work without them. We have facilitators here with us tonight, Fanny Howie, and they've been kind of running this whole process. We're going to go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about our promise. So our promise in the referendum, we promise to have safe and secure buildings. There's a $54 million capital referendum that the voters approved for that. And we promised facility upgrades and to right size. We also promised to work on career, innovation, and tech. And so some of those improvements are happening already in the buildings, but we need to finalize and look at what we're going to do going forward in the future, which is part of our right sizing efforts and really looking at programming and how programming drives what we do in buildings. A little bit of history on right sizing. We're trying to solve for a couple of different things right now. So with our right sizing efforts, what we do know is demographically things have changed. But in 2007, we had 26,000 students. Right now today, we have 15,400 students. We're slated to have 4,600 students next year. And in 2024, that's 1,400. That's 14,200 students. You got me? All right. Thank you, Tracy. So where we currently are right now, so the current state of the corporation, we're looking at declining enrollment. Also, the student needs have changed drastically since the pandemic. Also looking at how we define career and tech to ensure that our students are college and workforce ready. I'm going to now turn things over to Fanny Howie, to Tracy. He's done a lot of the work. We've worked collaboratively with our stakeholders, internal groups. We've had surveys out there, and we work with our task force members and our cabinet. Tracy and his team has taken all of that information along with the facility studies that have kind of laid out the platform in every single building, gone over the conditions and where every single building stands. So Tracy's going to take it from here with some of the options and just walk you through the work that we've been doing.
Thanks, Karima. Okay, can you hear me okay? I'm going to try to keep this right here so I can stay constant. Okay, so first of all, it is awesome to see a full room. This is a really important discussion that we're going to go through today. And there's a couple things that as we go through the night, I want to just kind of reassure you what our purpose is as we go through this. So as we start tonight, I'm going to cover the goals of this facilities master plan. Okay, just to kind of ground us, those of you who may not have been involved so far, to give you some background of why we're here, some of the data that we've collected, and so you can see some of that data that's out there. And then I'm going to take you through some options overviews. Okay, and again, here's what I want to explain about this tonight, is that tonight we're going to discuss options and scenarios. And that's all we're going to discuss. We're not discussing what you're not going to see tonight is you're not going to see what the final master plan is. Oftentimes when you go through an options kind of scenario or a scenario development, you have to have a starting point, okay? And so what I'm going to share with you is that, there's going to be options that you don't like. And you know what? That's okay. That's what we need to hear. We need to hear why you don't like options, but I'm going to ask you not to just stop there. But if you don't like options, we would sure like to see what makes options better, what makes scenarios better, to get us to the goals that we need to get to for South Bend schools. We know that there's things that need right-sized. We know that programs need realigned. We've been listening, and we've tried to make adjustments into the scenarios that really try to respond to that. But I'm going to tell you, they're not always easy. Some of them are really hard decisions to make, But what we're trying to do is maintain the integrity of programs, maintain the integrity of operational costs, maintain the integrity of keeping, trying to get schools the right size, with the right balance of resources, with the right balance of teachers, administrators, the ability to provide some equity across the district. And so there's some tough things in here, but again, with those tough things, I think there's some real solutions in here too. So when we get to the end of the night, this is kind of a different setup. Notice you're at round tables, and we're at round tables for a reason. Part of what we want to do is we want to have a discussion, a small group discussion around the benefits and challenges of the scenarios. You're not going to vote on anything because there's no sense in voting on something. There's nothing to vote on. We really want to vet through things. So what likely will happen of the three scenarios that you see tonight, it is likely a combination of the three in some way, shape, or form. And so the idea is to try to extract all the benefits out of there and get rid of all the challenges that we can to provide the best pathways for facilities moving forward. Now, here's the things that a facilities plan won't fix. A facilities plan doesn't fix kind of operational and amount of dollars that come in. Can it save dollars? Absolutely, it can save some dollars. But it can't fix everything. But what it can do is align the programs the right way. It can get buildings in the right condition. It can give you the right program spaces in your buildings to support the educational model that your kids and teachers deserve. And so the goal of that is to really move forward in that. So again, I encourage you tonight that if you don't like options, tell us. That's great. Because I'm going to tell you, there's some options on here that I'm not sure I can see work all together yet. But that's why we need your input. And it's genuine input that you're giving us. And what you're going to see is from the last community response, you're going to see some of that happen because the guiding principles that were developed because of your surveys, because of meeting with principals, because of meeting with community groups, we've been able to develop some guiding principles to give us those guidelines and those scenarios. So let me take you through where we are and where we're going. This is a two-phase process. The first phase is really focused on secondary schools. The remaining dollars of the referendum are really going to be directed at visible things that you can see. You spent this is tough. This microphone's a little tough. So so the first amount of money that got spent is really a lot of stuff behind the walls that you really can't see, but infrastructure is really important. But there's a promise made to be able to see good programmatic changes, stuff that you can see when you go into the referendum. And so the first phase is really focused on those secondary schools. We're going to come back in the fall, and we're going to start paying attention to elementary schools too. And we're going to see what a facilities plan looks like in the future for elementary schools and how that aligns to your secondary programs. And so it's a two-phase program, and we're hoping that you stick with us through the entire thing. We hope you encourage more people to be part of this process as we move into the fall and do the same thing. And I hope what you're going to see is that the planning practice and the community engagement and getting people out to see this stuff is a standard operations procedure of South Bend Schools. Is that we want people here. We want the feedback. And so we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep coming to you and looking for advice from you guys. But also what I do know about facilities plan, I shared this at the last community meeting, is that when you're doing facilities master planning, there's a balance. There's a balance between people that want to see a data-driven process. Just do the data. Well, if I just look at the data, I run the risk of ignoring community needs. And then people say, well, you got to follow what the community wants. And I say, well, if I just follow what the community wants, I may ignore the data needs. And so good facility master planning is how you balance the two. Is how you look at community needs and balance with the data that really get the right alignment that you need for schools. And so that's the challenge of any master plan. So a lot of you have seen the four-legged stool. We pay attention to educational framework, programs. That is the foundation, the cornerstone of good facilities planning. We have to look at enrollment and demographics. But look, we're not just looking at the number. We're looking at the types of students you serve and where those students need to be served. We also look at condition, and I'm going to show you some information on physical condition of facilities and then educational condition of facilities, because both matter when you're looking at facilities. And then finally, you have to look at cost. And cost is a critical driver here. Now, 35 million, and I learned a long time ago, never say only and million in the same sentence. But I will tell you, the 35 million in construction today, well, doesn't go as far as we'd like it to. And so we have to be smart with our dollars when we invest them. and then hopefully get the trust in there so it's sometime down the future we can have more dollars to do this. We know you have restrictions. We know the state has laid down restrictions about how much communities can even raise on their own anymore. And that's difficult to deal with, especially when you have infrastructure needs that you have. And the infrastructure needs on the communities aren't just at schools. I know they're in the city, they're in the water lines, they're in the sewer lines, they're in the electrical lines. Everything about that is difficult for a community to balance. But we also know that education is the cornerstone of all this. And so it's an important investment to be made. We talk a lot in this process about a triangle, a balance of a triangle. That, and if you haven't heard this, is what we're trying to get to is this idea that there's always this want to have the best and most robust programs in a school district you could have. And you know what? I agree with that. Everybody agrees with that. Everybody would like to have smaller school buildings, good right-sized buildings that have the right class sizes, that are manageable, that fit your community. And everybody would love to have low operating costs. No doubt. We'd love to run our houses like this. Here's the issue with this, is that when you're in this public sector and you're trying to do all three, it's difficult to have all three. When you have low operating costs and robust programs, your schools have to be a little bigger to make sure you have enough students in there, what we call full-time equivalency dollars, to pay for the programs. If you want those robust programs and small schools, you're going to pay a little more to do that. So here's the thing, is that the triangle is not about picking two. It never has been. The triangle is about how you balance the three. What matters to you as a community? And there's different communities that have different needs. I work in communities that say, look, we want the lowest operating cost, okay? Well, this is what that means to you. And that's okay, as long as it's their community want and need. You're gonna see in the survey that this community leads towards programs. And that's awesome to see. Now we just have to figure out how we manage good, robust programs, clearly defined pathways in order to make that happen. And so how do you balance this, and what does South Bend's triangle look like? That's what the planning has to be about. So the first community meeting results were pretty robust, 1,600 responses. That's pretty awesome. That's a good representation. And I will tell you that what we focused on, if you didn't get a chance to take the survey, but what we focused on was inadequacies in the district. Focusing on what the inadequacies were from a community perspective. We focused on how to improve outcomes. You know, what are the things we need to do to improve the outcomes for students and teachers and staff and the community. We also looked at the ability to deliver career and technical education. We talked about magnet programs and how those impact enrollment and what those mean. So let me take you through some of these. I'll just give you kind of a high level. They're online so you can see them, but so when we talk about the appropriate size, and this was a perception survey, no question, there's the perception, because we wanted to see the perception of people. What do you think from a community perspective about these issues? So things like operating costs are appropriate for the district. You can see that, 40% of people disagree that the district spends the dollars the right way. Okay, well, what does that mean? And so you go through comments. Oh, I have it right here. 160 pages of comments from the community that are sorted, that are read through. They're not edited word for word. They're edited for misspelling. Spell check. But they're read through to make sure that we hear what you're saying. So what does it mean, operating costs? Well, a lot of it was we don't spend dollars equally among students. So guess what I'm going to show you tonight. I'm going to show you how you spend dollars on students, because that's what you want to hear and that's what you want to see. We also look at the offering of robust programs. Now, here's what's interesting is that a lot of the community agrees that there are programs out there for students. The comments went to this idea that they're not always accessible to all students. That's the key. That's the key. If you've got good programs, but they're not accessible, then why have good programs? And so we listen to that. We also, this is the triangle one. And so you can see, trying to balance a triangle, that programs really kind of dominated the landscape. Inequities. A little more on inequities. Inequities and geographical feeder patterns. So this idea that the old kind of It's almost in today's modern world of K-12 education, the neighborhood school is kind of taken a different meaning. And even school districts have kind of gotten away from a neighborhood concept. But what we saw in comments, we've heard from our community task force, we even heard from our principals, is that that neighborhood feeder is an important element to success in South Bend schools. So how do you get back to that? But how do you do that and keep the diversity? How do you keep robust programs? And again, it's all the balance of that. We also look at facilities conditions, and most people agree, 68% agree that the condition of facilities is inadequate. Agreed. As we look across, here's the thing though, is that in our evaluation, what we found is that your buildings are very good buildings. It's the infrastructure of the buildings that really need the repairs. So also then we looked at the program offerings and access to quality programs, and this is where it told us that you know that there's good programs out there. This is where it told us there's not access to it. And then we talked about improving outcomes. How do you improve outcomes? Is one way to balance enrollment? Most people agree that it is. How do you balance enrollment in the district? Well, there's a lot of different ways to balance enrollment in the district. We also looked at realigning boundaries. And you know what's interesting is that there's a lot of people, 60-some%, that say realigning boundaries makes a lot of sense. Now, until I have to come back and move boundaries, where you become really unpopular, I'm going to tell you that sometimes a district needs to step back for a second. And they need to look at their boundaries, they need to look at their feeder patterns, and they need to review it to today's standards and the future standards, instead of relying on boundaries that were created 20 or 30 years ago. And so, because neighborhoods demand that, the balance of enrollment is dependent on the ability to be agile in your feeder patterns and your boundaries. And so sometimes you have to make some corrections in that. Reduce the number of facilities people don't agree with. And you know what? I can see that. And I've said it all along in this process. The idea of closing schools aren't in the business for closing schools. That's bad business. But sometimes you have to realign your facilities and get your square footage to where you need it to be. Because you're going to see that there's dollars being spent on facilities where there ain't kids. And so and that's your dollars being spent there. So we have to balance this idea that the community has this perception that dollars are being misspent, but also this idea that they don't like the idea of right sizing the district square footage wise in order to spend the dollars the right way. Now that's kind of to me, that's a tough one to work through. And as a planner and looking at that is that, how do you balance those two? When I know that empty seats cost you dollars that could be better directed to kids in seats. So we have to pay attention to all this, and you see how sometimes the data conflicts with itself. And that's the challenge we're faced with. Career and technical education was another piece of it. Now, here's the goals. And as we move forward, the goals of career and technical education are straightforward. First of all, the district would like to provide a standalone regional career and technical center operated by South Bend schools. Now, there was, I think in the survey, 85% of people agreed with that concept, a standalone CTE. Now, what the tricky part was that when we asked about where it should be located or how it should be located, most people thought it should go into an existing high school. I'm going to show you kind of the benefits and challenges of going into an existing high school building. And so, but the other things is that the center, and I think I really do think, as I've been in this district now almost 9 months talking to people, I think there's a misperception about what a career center, a standalone career center, is in comparison to your high schools. And I think that people think that a career center actually competes for enrollment with your high schools. And that's simply not the case. The intention of a career center is to enhance the programs, provide clear pathways, to expand graduation pathways for students, and allow them to get certifications and state and industry certifications, allow them dual credit in college, but are also fed through the high schools by doing primary programs in the high school that introduce them to career and technical education. And so don't think of a career center as a competition to the enrollment. Think of it as a complement to the program. That it's a clear pathway that moves forward. That allows, and then finally, a big goal is to work collaboratively and stand side by side with business and industry partners. Get the businesses involved, have them help you in this concept, get them standing side by side, get your kids out in their industries and their businesses, learning day-to-day skills that they will get in the real world. This is a critical piece to any successful career and technical education program. And so in that, though, remember, that becomes the challenge then of when the business and business partners and industry partners start to get involved, they also want to see certain things happen that make it successful. So I will tell you immediately that one of the challenges of putting a career and technical center, even as a standalone, in an existing high school, is that every school has either a reputation or they're in some part of the city that people don't have access to. And so you limit the ability or the desire for students to want to go to that school. Because look, if I went to Riley and you told me I had to go over to, I don't know, some other school, and you're going to say, why go to Riley High School? I go to that school I'm going to play on Friday night. And so all of a sudden you get this kind of immediate kind of social impact of students. That's just one challenge. The other one is if you want to make it a regional center, getting people to come in from other districts to go to an existing high school still can be difficult. It's just a challenge. And I don't say that because it's here. It's a challenge everywhere across the country. We already have a challenge of getting high school kids out of their high schools to go to career centers because it gets them out of their high school for 2 or 3 hours. And they think, I'm going to lose my social network if I leave high school for 2 or 3 hours. So we already face those challenges for career and technical education. But if you see the pathways and you see how the pathways are going to be realigned now to be very clear, and we group in the right way, so people understand that when I go to this school, that I know we have a concentration in this career pathway. And we're going to start to try to make them make sense. Because I know that over time, that as programs get put in different places over time, I know it can get confusing. And that the career and technical center is going to take a completely different direction than that. But it will take a standalone career center to get you there. Okay, so I think that one of the things that, remember when I went back and said there's no final decisions? I think one of the decisions that probably will move forward is that you're going to get a standalone CTE center in this plan. So I can tell you that what we don't know is how to implement it yet. But that's what we need some input on. Let's look at some data. Prima already took you through this, some decline in enrollment. What I talk about on this one all the time is about the ability to, I know that every district that's in decline enrollment said, we need to get students back. But I keep saying the first step that you have to do is stop the decline. What do you do to just stop the decline? Once you stop the decline and you get all those programs in the right order, you get your facilities in the right condition, all of a sudden then you can start to think about how you attract students back. So step by step, don't get too far ahead of yourself. And again, what these options are trying to do is they're trying to provide those pathways and those career pathways and the educational pathways, magnet, thematic, to get students interested and engaged. This is the cost per student. So I'll just take you through it really quick. This is a staff cost, the operating cost, enrollment divided right there. That's a cost per student per building this year. And that's the ranking, how it works. It's pretty simple. Those are the numbers right there. They come right out of the ledger. We spend this much on teachers in school. We spend this much on operating. Hold on. And to combine, and then this is what it takes. Now, here's the thing, is that there is disparity among experienced teachers and how much we pay and how many are there. But understand that there's also programmatic implications, school size implications. All those have to go into play here. If you also go to the middle schools there, you can see the numbers. Again, I'm not placing, and here's the thing about facilities planning, I'm not placing any judgment on the number, I'm just showing you the number. Because that's the number. And as we go through this, then we look at capacity and utilization. This has been a topic of discussion since even the minute before I walked into South Bend. I think I heard it driving in. is this excessive seats. So when I first came in, I heard all the time, they're going to ask you to close a high school. And I was like, I'm not sure I see the numbers for that yet. And so early on, I heard about, oh, they're going to close this building, they're going to close this building. And I'm like, I'm not even convinced you close the building yet. And so, but as I go through here and I see that the utilization and this excess amount of seats in just the secondary grade level start to hover around, I don't know, 4,100 seats. Think about that, 4,100 seats. If Washington's 1,500, that's 2 Washingtons and half a Washington. Now, kind of put that in perspective a minute. And that's somehow that has to be corrected. In some way, shape, or form, that has to be corrected. Because the amount of square footage that goes into doing that and the amount that you have to maintain, sweep the floors, turn the lights on, heat and cool it, mow the yard, all those expenses go to 4,100 empty seats. Now, again, you know I'm not from here. If I'm looking at this, I'm going, how do you fix that? How do you fix that? In the meantime, improve programs, get the pathways the right way, do least harm to communities and neighborhoods, and start spending money towards directing the kids and programs. I wish this job was easy, but it's just not. And so if we're going to deal with this and right sizing, because that's what was promised in the bond, how do you get there? When we look at the condition scores, based on a 100-point scale, we evaluated all these things that you see here, and you can see kind of the order of these. Now, once again, I don't put a judgment on a number because there's no reason to put a judgment in a number. Because there's things in here that are easily fixable, that can be done to get these kind of back in another order. But what I do know is things like when I look at a Clay High School, that number equates to about $30 to $35 million of things that need fixed. 35 million, that's what you have left in the bond program. So when I look at that, I'm like, what do you do with that? How do you get that school so the infrastructure of it does support? Or can you? At what point does a building say, uncle? Just the building says that. And so again, it's not a judgment on the building at all, or the educational process that happens in the buildings. It is simply that you look at the systems, you see how old they are, you see what's broke, you see what's going to break, and that's your number. It's as objective as it can be. When I also then start to look at, oh, and this is one more on condition, the investments in the school since 2017. This is just the secondary schools out there. And that's how numbers are being spent. Now, I will tell you that Riley's a little deceptive in that a lot had to go into fixing the pool because that's the district pool. That's where all the regional and state level competitions even happen to Riley. So things had to be fixed there. There's a big number in that 5 million. But again, right there's a number. And so you see these numbers being spent in this, and again, you probably haven't seen a lot on the surface. You haven't probably seen programmatic improvements in spaces. You haven't seen those, kind of things that you can see on the outside because that infrastructure needed fixed. I'm going to tell you, that pool fix at Riley isn't about the water. It's about everything you can't see to make sure the water's right. And so the dollars have to go into that infrastructure in order to make the building survive. But in time, what starts to happen is that the gap just keeps getting bigger. That there's only so much funding that can only fix so much space. And again, that's not necessarily on the community. That's from state level funding, the ability to fund, all those kind of things that and I will tell you, most of you know this, I do this across the country. There isn't a school district out there that can afford their facilities. I'm going to tell you that right away. The goal is to maintain them. So at some point, they just don't fail on their own. And so we have to figure out then where this dollar, again, the next 35 million is promised to be in front of you. is promised to be in programmatic improvements that people can see, that students can feel, that support the programs and the pathways that they want to do. But guess what? You still have infrastructure stuff. That's never going away as we deal with that. Educational adequacy. Again, looking at all these functions in here, and this is actually on a 30-point scale, and if you can look across here, you can see where a lot of this is around things that are in a building. When I talk about educational adequacy, what I'm looking for are the things that support education. So for instance, this is a real easy one. Like, let's say that your standard for technology now for visual technology is LED screens. So our teams go in and they see if there's an LED screen. To me, as an adequacy, I'm not concerned if it works. That's a condition assessment. I'm just concerned that you have the screen. Does that make sense? And so we're going in and looking for things like that, technology, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And I will tell you that these numbers you see are a little deceptive. And the reason they're a little deceptive is because of this. There are things and standards that this district wants to get to that simply you haven't gotten to yet. And a real simple example is this. Since COVID, water bottle stations have now become the standards. Drinking fountains, they've closed them all down. Kids drinking out of the same fountain just doesn't work anymore. Guess how many water bottle fountain fillers you have in your schools? Not a lot yet. And so guess what? Almost every school got dinged on that. But that doesn't mean that they're not trying to get there, and it's not a judgment on what's going on in the building. It's just a standard this district wants to get to. And so if you don't have a standard you want to get to, and if you don't see the measurement of it, how are you ever going to reach that standard? And so the goal is to get to those standards, and sometimes it just hits a building. Don't put a judgment on the number. Just make sure that it's an analysis to see how we get to a certain point. Now, all of this that I just went through. Now, you're getting handed right now what we call an options packet that have some of the data in there that I went through already. But everything I've talked about led to what we call guiding principles. The idea that we needed rules to plan by. So as we went to our community task force, as we went to principals, other groups, as we went out to look at those and talk to those groups and organizations, we said, look, we need some rules. And the first rule that came out for everybody was this idea of equitable platforms for all students. And immediately I thought of this old this has been around a while, but I thought of this image of equality versus equity. And I think this actually goes a long way, because there is a difference between equality and equity. And the big difference is this, is that not every neighborhood and not every school has the same need. It's just not possible. The idea of providing equity in schools is to provide the resources and the programs and the ability to serve the students that are in that school building. Equality means that if a student walks into a science room in one building, that science room should be equivalent to the other one in the next building. That's a standard to go to. But when I talk about this equality equity, the idea that we should cut down a fence so everybody has the same defeats the purpose of the fence. And so what we talk about a lot, and again, you know me, I just say it as it is. One of the things I hear constantly is, okay, well, we got Adams there. Adams has that, and we don't have that and that. And I'm like, well, the idea isn't to take away from Adams. The idea is that everybody needs to have the saying of, look at Washington. That's the school you want to be at. So we don't cut down the fence to defeat the purpose of the fence. We give everybody the right tools to be able to get over that fence. And eventually, guess what we got to do with the fence? We just got to get rid of it, where there's no obstacle in the way to see the goals that we need to get to. Other ones that we look at. Interestingly enough, in the secondary discussion, the community group talked about it must consider childhood and pre-K offerings in this district. We don't get success in high school unless we got kids that come in that are prepared. Okay, so thank you, Community Task Force, for getting me from 12th grade all the way to 3-year-olds and trying to figure out how buildings help that. Well, guess what? We have an option that shows that. Must have engaging programs and facility designs and spaces that support that. Meaning that if we have engaging programs, if we have an engaging robotics program, we're not going to stick them in an elementary school classroom. We're going to put it in a full lab that has the robotics equipment and necessary resources for a robotics program. So get the programs that are engaging, and give them the support spaces to do it. Concentration on geographic patterns. Again, this one's difficult because not only that, because if you look at the next one, it says clear educational pathways, both programmatic and geographic. So how do I take good geographic feeder paths? The idea that when a family moves into South Bend, that they see a clear pathway from pre-K to 12th grade. And it's not confusing to say, I got to go here to get this, and then here to get that, and then back over here to get that. You know what? That scares any family away. So you've got to figure out geographically how you get the programs in the right place, and you clear those pathways for programs. And that's not just all those career pathways. That's special education, that's fine arts, that's athletics. Just go down the list. It's every program that you can think of. The idea that special ed children don't have a pathway from elementary to middle to high that's not clear, if that occurs, and it does occur, and it's not just occurring here, it's occurring everywhere. I'm going to tell you, that's not right. But our buildings sometimes don't support it. So we have to get that realigned. So that just, again, when I'm talking about programs, I'm not just talking about career pathways. I'm talking about all those program offerings that this district offers. Align leadership to match schools and communities they serve. I think this is a big deal. I think the idea that we can put leaders in communities in program specialties that really fit who they are. But in order to do that, again, you need to clear up these pathways. You need to clear up these programs. And you need to get them right so we know that, look, this leader at this school really has this kind of personality to lead a fine arts program. That's how facilities can help support that. You must consider transportation. One of the biggest inequities we saw in the survey, and frankly, a lot of comments, was about transportation. The history of transportation in this district and how inequitable it is. That's a problem. In school consolidation that's occurred in the past, we had a principal talk about in our principals meeting that talked about a school that two got consolidated, but we got kids that live on this far side of the boundary now that during the pandemic found it difficult to go get the food, the technology, the resources they needed because the pandemic shut down everything and they didn't have access over to the building. We've got to figure out how, if there's going to be reduction of square footage, how we don't do that. And we think about that. But again, part of that aren't easy decisions. Part of that is feeder patterns. Some part of that is boundaries. Part of that is looking at what schools you have, what schools you're going to have in the future. Also, the equitable resources. Equitable resources can't happen when I've got buildings that are this big versus this big. We've got to figure out a way to balance that. And that's across the district. That's even at elementary schools that we're going to be talking about in the fall. And then finally, to preserve the ability to maintain enrollment. So when you make a decision on an option or a scenario, or they become recommendations, that the simplest rules do no harm. The complicated thing is don't lose students. Don't lose a building. Figure out how that works. Maintain what you can, because the fact of the matter is you're in competition for students. Everybody knows it. And it's time. It is time for South Bend to go on the offense. And we have to. And that's okay. I mean, it's okay to go on offense when it comes to fighting for your kids. And so this alignment of resources and maintaining that enrollment is really, really critical to these options. So let's talk about the options. All right. So in your packet, they're right in front of you, so I'd like you to open up, that way you can follow on it, where you don't have to follow all the words on the screen necessarily. And if you don't mind, I'm going to take a drink just for a second. All right, the first option is for high schools. And we've kind of paired these. We separated but paired them so you can kind of see a relationship between the two. This is what we call 4 high schools, a new CTE center on a new site. Okay, so this maintains the integrity of having 4 high schools in the district. It actually regionalizes those also, but it does make some pretty tough decisions here. So the first one is a new career and technical center, centrally located in the district, accessible to all. The second one is a performing arts dual language 612 academy. Now, one of the things that we've noticed is that fine arts is an important program in this district. Right now, it doesn't have a clear pathway. It doesn't have the program support it needs through the pathway from K to 12. That pairing it with a dual language program and putting it in a building that's right size for it was the goal behind this. Now, what we suggested is that it goes to Clay IA, but that doesn't mean Clay IA's program goes away. We just shift it over to Edison. Now, and the reason for that is we go into these options is that the option in this one says that we would do selected demolition at Clay High School. We would leave it as a district-wide sports and athletic complex for the district that is desperately needed. As you see across the district, and we've heard this time and time again, you see practices on middle school sites and other sites that are cramped, crowded, kids are on the fields way too late. We don't have the right lighting at certain fields, all that. The idea is that do some selective demolition, make the Clay site a reasonable site for an athletic complex for the district. Leave gym. You're in Indiana, you need gyms. So leave gyms if you need to leave gyms. With that though, then we got Washington High School. Now what you're gonna see at Washington and at Adams is that the option doesn't change for either one of those. I won't repeat Washington or Adams for the rest of them just for time's sake. But at Washington, the idea is to do renovation to parts of that building that really create a medical pathway that is supported in the programmatic sense. Full medical labs, full investment into the building that attracts kids so they can get certifications, they can get pathways into medicine, opening up a medical clinic and a dental clinic for the community that's operational. Students can perform in those. They can get real on-site experience. Investing into the West Side that needs that, but also align it with the right types of programs that would attract students like sports marketing. What if you kind of paired the sports career paths with medical? That's a pretty cool pathway for a lot of students out there. They see those pathways as trainers, as sports marketing, just go down the list. The idea is to invest into that building to make sure that we have the programmatic space. Here's what else it's going to do. That big number of utilization will start to go away because first of all, we're going to reduce the capacity of the building somewhat. Now we don't reflect that in the number, but by making those big labs, we're going to have to take away some classrooms. But that's okay because you're going to have the right program spaces and you have enough space in the building to renovate it to get those spaces. That's a big investment into Washington for this option here. For Riley, it's a project lead the way focus. Again, a direct CTE feeder. We also think that a centrally located CTE sits almost directly between Riley and Washington. And so they are really direct feeders, but keep understanding that every high school would have some level of CTE. So for instance, I go back to the dual language fine art, the performing arts. Why wouldn't you put construction trades at the fine arts school? Building scenes, doing the construction of it, doing the management of ordering, those kind of things. Why don't you do digital marketing and digital photography and digital programming? All those things that align to fine arts are really good career pathways to get back into fine arts. They align exactly the right way. So again, clear pathway, direct feeder, clear feeder from 6 to 12. We've reduced some of the square footage. We've actually got an increase in utilization from 66 to 75%, and we've reduced by 840 seats. And we kept a high school in every region. We got direct feeders for programs. We did programmatic improvements. I'm just going down the guiding principles here. That's all I'm trying to do in this option. Now, the tough part is movement. Now, here's another thing I should explain, and let's make this very clear. Because what's going to happen is that we're going to leave this meeting and somebody says, next year they're closing Clay to move this over here. No. This can't happen next year, folks. We're in May already, okay? That gives us about 3 months that we've got a lot of investment to do. Renovations, construction, We've got things to do before we can do anything. So don't think this is an immediate move. It is a strategic move to get to where we need to get to.
What is your box?
This one down here?
Bottom left.
Okay, Performing Arts Academy at Clay IA, the 612, that's a dual language. Yeah, sorry about that. That's
612.
612. Yeah. And again, the intent is for that school to be small, 800 students. It's a boutique type of high school, really focused on the pathways that students are interested in, and it's very clear. But here's the thing, is that Clay IA will require an addition to get there, but there will be an addition for fine arts and dual language programs that really fit the programming. So we've got an investment there. The middle schools that go along with that, of course, you see this is most compatible with high school A. Again, we're talking about Clay IA being converted to 612. That is will be the receiving school. In this one, you see where LaSalle and Kennedy would be housed at the LaSalle facility. Not a K-8 school, a K-5, 6, 8 program for the academies. LaSalle has 1,200 seats with 400 kids in it. Do the math. That's 33% utilization. Now, in this case, where Kennedy then can actually be converted to a district-wide early childhood and pre-K center that offers, again, the guiding principle of being able to offer the early childhood opportunities for students in this district. And my understanding is that there's enough students to keep a pre-K at every elementary and to fill a program like this. The need is that great in South Bend. So we found an opportunity then by combining the academies into one building, not necessarily programs, to do just that. And we provide an opportunity for pre-K and early services. Again, middle school utilization goes from 66 to 74%, a more reasonable number out there, and reduces the number of empty seats by 670. That's the size of an elementary school. So in the AA options, you can see in the guidelines how we try to meet all those guidelines. A little spoiler alert, that in the back of your packet, you're going to see kind of a matrix that talks about the guidelines and where we think that they met the guidelines and where we don't think they met the guidelines. Let's move to option B. This is what we call 4 high schools and a CT at an existing high school site. Now, once again, this is probably most compatible with the middle school option B that you're going to see next. Not that they can't be interchanged some, but in this one, we would see Performing Arts Dual Language 612 Academy at LaSalle. So LaSalle gets a high school presence again. Again, the idea here is that if you don't know something about LaSalle right now, is LaSalle houses a business that supports all the fine arts or performing arts in the city. They do all the props, all the costumes, everything that's associated with those fine arts. There's a running business there that does that. Okay, career pathway, figuring out LaSalle has the ability to house a fine arts dual language. And so, and it brings a high school back to LaSalle. Once again, the Adams and Washington, very same option. They didn't change. In this one, Clay High School, the site becomes a new career technical center. Selective demolition, because here's what we got. We got a 260,000 square foot building for a building that probably needs to start 80,000 that might grow to 120,000. We don't need a building that big, and frankly, that building will not be conducive to housing a career center. It doesn't have the right spaces to do it. The idea behind the facilities plan is not to shade the square peg to get in the round hole. It's to make them the same. And so what that would demand at Clay is a selective demolition of that building to get you there. Again, same thing. All high schools have career courses in them. CT will not compete with high schools. Riley continues to be in this option, the same as the Project Lead the Way focused school, will continue to be that. It increases the high school utilization from 66 to 72% and decreases excess capacity by 630. Now, once again, here's the thing, is that if you put a CTE on an existing high school site, what you deal with is the high school site. And so that's kind of the decision to be made here. Is that if there's a presence of high school in the north, which we don't want to get rid of, what this does, it gets a comprehensive high school out of the north part of the city. And I would say, again, I'm going to tell you the benefits and challenges of these. I think you own the site, it's an existing site, I think that's a good thing. But those are the challenges for the difference in this one. Now, if you look at then the summary for option B, again, the big one here is the LaSalle facility. B is converted to the 612 Fine Arts School of Language program. And gets it back over to the LaSalle Academy. Again, Edison, this means LaSalle then moves to the Clay IA building, and then Edison is a receiving school for the Clay IA program. So again, we increase utilization of middle schools. We have the ability to reduce some of those spaces that we don't need. Frankly, where that is LaSalle. 1,200 seats for 400 kids. All of a sudden, we just put 500 high school kids in that, which we don't count as middle school seats anymore. So you see that's where the increase you get and the decrease of 450 seats in this one. Option C. Now, this is responding to the idea that don't close a high school in our town. We had to have an option for it, and there's an option for it. In this, again, this is a new career center centrally located. Adam's saying, in this case, we would convert Clay and Riley High School to 612 school buildings, which then requires 2 middle schools to come offline. Because you're going to take that 6 to 8 population and already take a utilization that's low and make that number worse. Now, in this case, when we were talking to the community task force, this was really important to them, was that we initially put together the option to say, we just have to look at 2 middle schools. And the community task force says that's not good enough. You need to be transparent about this and what would be the most likely schools that would be there. And so what we did was we looked at the feeders, we looked at kind of the history, we looked at everything like that. And this is like for Riley, the logical geographical feeder for that school is Jackson. Now, the problem with that is then all of a sudden your southernmost middle school is gone. It goes into Riley, which is the southernmost high school. But what I want you to keep in mind though, is that even in the Edison and the Jackson scenario, that it doesn't necessarily mean we take those buildings offline immediately. What it means is that these buildings could possibly be used in an elementary facility plan solution. That if those buildings are more conducive and have the right spaces for elementary education, then maybe those buildings don't have to go away. Maybe our elementary solution is in our middle school building. And so, even though we talk about the closure of 2 middle schools there, we don't necessarily have to talk about just getting rid of the buildings. Now, I know this one's tough. Now, I'm a former middle school teacher. I did it for a while, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. I loved it. But this one, I mean, I'm going to tell you, these are middle schools. And I think middle schools are crucial age in education. And so I think in this one, the challenge is that how do you house 6 through 8 with 9 through 12? And is it possible to do that? Well, right now, Riley has a capacity of about 2,000, has 1,000 kids in it. You likely could probably fit a couple hundred middle school kids in that and never see them from high school students. And so we could utilize our buildings better in this case. And so you see then in our middle school summary here, that again, we go back to LaSalle and Kennedy. Kennedy would be housed at the LaSalle facility. Edison will close as a middle school. Jackson will close as a middle school. But it increases our middle school utilization to 77% and reduces by 1,080 seats, which is the capacity of those 2 schools. Now, those are the 3 scenarios or options that we have in front of you. Now, I will tell you again, likely the answer is somewhere among all of them. That's likely the answer. And so the goal of what we want to do now is that we're going to work in small groups. Now, here's a couple of things. Is that you have index cards on your table, which I think are going to be very important because if you have some questions, If you have questions, I want you to write those on those index cards. But also, what we're going to do is we're going to have at the table, can I borrow your sheet, your yellow sheet for you really quick? What we want you to do is we want you to discuss each option, and we want you to talk about benefits and challenges of those options, the things that you like, things you don't like, the things you can see could improve it. Walk through each option, talk about each school as a table, and work through that as a table. We're not asking you to do the survey here, but we're asking you to have a discussion around this. Most of our tables have community task force members at them. That's intentional, because it's their job to help report this back to us, the conversations that you have. Nothing more that I would like than have individual conversations with each of you, but my wife told me I have to be back by Sunday. And so here's what I promise you, is that we have facilitators in this room. We have Mary Krupinski right there. We have Elena Abbott right there. We've got Karima, Cordell, that we're going to be walking around this room. And we're going to, if you have a question, I want to answer your question directly. I feel like if we just open this up right now, you wouldn't get a full answer that you deserve. So spend the next, whatever it takes, to walk through these options as a group. Talk about what you like, what you don't like, how you would fix them, what are some options. Here's the other thing. If you think there's another option out there, give it to us. Give it to us. Because I'm going to tell you, it's effective. Here's the other thing now. To utilize that options packet you have, if you want to take the survey tonight, you can go ahead and do that. There is an online survey already. It's live, it's ready to go. You can take that online survey. Those who don't want to take it online, or simply don't like to get online to do these things, we have paper surveys for you that we'd like you to fill out for us, and we're going to collect them and we'll put the information in for you. But here's the thing, the questionnaire is open until May 15th. Now folks, I'm going to tell you, May 15th is really important. The board, what we're trying to get to is a third week June deliverable on secondary recommendations to the board. But what that takes is disseminating all that information, 160 pages of comments from just the framework stuff. I can imagine what we're going to get for this one. That we have to go through all that and make sure that we have going down to the right recommendations for secondary schools. And that's why it's important, your feedback's important. We're going to read it, we're going to see it, and if there's better ideas behind this, get to that. One more thing here, just really quickly. And then it's going to be on the district website. Actually, it probably is going to be there very quickly because it's going live. Get this out to your neighbors, to your friends, to teacher class, whatever it is. We're going to push it out to students as much as we can. We want to push out that survey. We have a Spanish survey for the Spanish-speaking community out there. We want to get participation there. But anybody we can get this survey to. If you think there are people that don't have access to technology or the internet to take the survey, take a paper survey with you and get it to your school. Or get it to somebody that you know in the school district. So we can take that and get it in. Okay, do you have a logistics question real quick?
That was my question.
Okay.
Whether people had access to the tools to log onto the internet. We have a Wi-Fi problem over here.
Yep, that's exactly right. So tonight we printed 50. What we're going to do is we're going to get hard copies to the schools out there.
But the other part of that is because we do have that. If I'm filling out that paper, I'm going to feel like I have to fill it out tonight to get it back to you.
Okay.
So I'm going to have a problem with digesting everything that you just gave.
I know. Here's what I was going to finish with that. I would not recommend that you finish this survey tonight. Because I think you have to consume a lot of information here. And I also think the discussion at your table will help with that, filling out the survey. And so if you don't want to turn it in, don't turn it in. But if you know somebody from the school district or you get it to your school, we will get the survey to enter that data for you. Folks, we're trying any way we can to get this data in, okay? And so we'll get it out to schools, paper surveys, as many as we can get. And if you need them, email the district. We'll get them to you. But we have till the 15th to get this completed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to the small group discussion. There will not be a formal closing. So when your table's done, if you got more questions, stick around. We'll stick around as long as you need to. But when your table's done, thanks for coming tonight. Be careful out there. I know it's raining and slick out there, and I know Cinco de Mayo is crazy out there tonight. So And so we want to make sure it's a fun night for me too. But be careful going home. Thanks for being here. Spread the word as much as you can. Thank you.
Henry, nice to meet you. Okay.
What I am really listening to
Would it be possible for myself and maybe some of the other reporters